war was great if you needed a job. It was easy to get, and it probably paid pretty well. The war was, of course, incredibly difficult in other ways. If you were at home, people you loved and cared about were serving in combat and could die at any minute. If your husband, your son, your father, your uncle, your friends, they were very likely serving in a combat capacity and could be killed at any minute. Unlike the wars we've seen recently in Iraq and Afghanistan, in those wars, there's a great many Americans who don't know anybody who served in those wars. Everyone knew a lot of people who served in World War II. And of course, that meant one of the things that was going on was funerals. A great deal of funerals. In any town of any size, there would be multiple funerals a week, and in many cases, multiple funerals a day if you lived in a big city like New York. Another thing this meant was that families had no fathers. Whether he was temporarily gone, serving in the war, or permanently gone, killed in the war, you had a great many children who spent as many as 5 years of their lives as young children with no father around, which of course puts a strain on the family. There was a shortage of goods. You may be making a lot of money, but of course a lot of goods were rationed. We'll get to that in a minute. And of course there was a fear of invasion. It's easy to look back now from the perspective of the 21st century and say, oh, the people on the home front were completely fine. But there was a tremendous fear that either the Germans or the Japanese would figure out a way to attack us here in America. Could be some sort of terrorist attack or some sort of invasion on the coast. And in fact, a Japanese submarine emerges off the coast. I believe a German submarine, emerges off the coast of the United States and sends a great fear through the American people. So that was very real. But there was also a lot of disposable income and a return of consumerism. Bars, theaters, and movies boomed. About a half of Americans saw at least one movie a week, those here at home anyway, not, of course, counting the soldiers. Magazines like Life, which contained pictures of the war, hit record highs in sales. Radios brought you news of the home front, all these wonderful classic movies. You should watch all of these if you have the time. Came out during this period. Casablanca, of course, is not only a great love story, but a powerful allegory of America's neutrality and refusal to enter into the war. You should watch it again with that in mind. There was rationing. Pretty much, so many goods were rationed. That meant you could only buy so much. You were given a little coupon book, and you had to have a coupon to buy things like gasoline, milk, silk, chocolate. You still had to pay for it. The coupon didn't buy it, but you had to have the coupon even to pay for it, because they were, of course, trying to preserve these goods and make sure we had enough to fight the war. It was very difficult to drive by car because you weren't really given that much of a gas allowance. And people began to travel, particularly for things like vacations, more and more by bus or train. But we also develop a resort industry, as a lot of people have a lot of disposable income. The war was very good for the economy. And we see a number of resorts, casinos, and racetracks begin popping up as vacation destinations. Dance halls are filled with local girls and soldiers and sailors on leave. And these were kind of where it was at if you wanted to go out and have a good time. The dominant music of the period was swing music, and artists like Benny Goodman, Duke Ellington, Tommy Dorsey, and Glenn Miller were kind of the great musical stars of the day. Goodman, importantly, hired a black piano player in 1935, Teddy Wilson. And music began to be integrated. And of course, swing dancing was all the rage of the day. Music wasn't the only thing to become segregated. Branch Rickey, the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, decided that it was time to give himself a competitive advantage and also do the right thing and sign an African American baseball player. He chose a World War II veteran, Jackie Robinson. and Robinson will enter the minor leagues as World War II is ending and will make his major league debut in April of 1947, going on to become one of the biggest stars in baseball, and according to polls at the time, one of the most widely admired and respected athletes of the day. As for the soldiers, they dreamed of home, of course, but mostly they dreamed of American girls. The pinup was everywhere. Sailors' lockers, soldiers' packs, and airplane nose cones all would feature images like this. The military believed in the company of wholesome American girls were vital, unlike some of these girls. And so the military sent the USO. These was primarily women who kind of served as hostesses. They traveled around to the troops in Europe and in the Pacific, and they had dance brigades which would get on and entertain the troops. They would actually have dances where the soldiers could go and for one night dance with some girl who's volunteered to go and kind of provide a little taste of home for the soldiers. It also brought celebrities, Ethel Merman singing up there in the top left, Bob Hope in the top right, and of course Captain America down there on the bottom. No unsupervised contact was allowed between the girls and the soldiers, but of course it happened anyway. And the military tended to look the other way. They kind of understood that if you take a bunch of 18 to 24-year-old guys and send them off to fight a war, and then you bring some girls around them, so things were going to happen. And so while that was tolerated tacitly, the military took great pains to root out any sort of gay or lesbian activity. So if you snuck off with one of the USO girls and hooked up with her, you kind of got a wink and a thumbs up and don't let anybody find out about this. If you snuck off with one of the other soldiers and hooked up with them, then there was going to be serious consequences. Colleges and universities back at home also became empty as the guys were all fighting in the war and women didn't go to college in significant numbers at the time. And so many universities around the country became training grounds and were turned into military camps. Many colleges, for example, didn't play football in 1944 and 1945, or basketball for that matter. And also universities were flooded with research dollars as they became centers for research to improve the war effort.